In June 1925, Lions Clubs International invited a panel of guests to speak at their convention. They were looking for a unifying cause. Many clubs throughout the United States and Canada were already supporting service initiatives for the visually impaired. The Lions of Ohio proposed hosting the International Convention at Cedar Point and organized the event in the hopes that the association would continue to support making Ohio's Braille magazine available to a broader audience. In their convention program, they expressed their wish for Lions Clubs International to earn the reputation of the eyes of the blind. We continue with the 100-year celebration and the commitment that ensues in the following vignettes.
Let's remind ourselves of this remarkable woman. She was born on June 27, 1880, in Tuscumbia, Alabama. From the beginning, she was a bright and curious child. She had just begun to speak when illness struck at 19 months old, leaving her deaf and blind. Her family noticed that without her ability to hear, their little girl stopped nearly all speech. She was plunged into a world of darkness and silence. Her life became a search for ways to understand her world and be understood. Even so, a silenced Helen remained tenuous and full of curiosity.
Imagine a world where you have no words to describe the many ideas and feelings inside your head. A world without understandable guidance, where you are locked off and alone, even when surrounded by others. I don't remember when I realized I was different from others, but I knew before my teacher came.
Helen was always a highly spirited and highly determined child. Everyone in our family says so, especially Mama. But then, her world was often frustrating, and she was prone to fits of temper. We have lost more than one of our porcelain dolls to Helen's frustrations.
My family just loves to tell tales about me and my mischief. In my world, I touched, but I did not know. I felt, but I could not name. The world was full of many ideas and feelings, but they were locked away from me, just out of reach. Every day was like being lost in the woods, with no path, no guide, and no voice to call for help. I found my way as best I could, and then my parents brought me a teacher. I was horrible to her. She was always correcting my manners and making me do things that were changing the way I understood the world around me.
What Helen needed was a teacher. In March of 1887, I arrived in the Keller household. A little nervous, but really excited to work with my new charge.
Water. It's a simple word, don't you think? My family members tell me it's the only word I still remembered and used from my infancy. Not even the word, really, just the sound babies make. But I could use it to get water. It took small steps, a lot of patience, and people that cared about me.
And with that little word, W-A-T-E-R, her world had changed forever. That word came from another's hand, and it fell into hers, into hands that had previously grasped at emptiness. And now her world was changed, and her heart leapt with the rapture of living. She wanted to know everything, always curious, wanted to know every word, but on that day she was content to learn the most basic and important of words: mother, father, teacher, the ones with whom she needed to communicate with.
SISTER. That day in the wheelhouse, that single living word, water, WATER. It awakened my soul, gave it joy, set it free. There were still barriers, true, but I knew those barriers could be swept away in no time.
With my guidance, Helen's world expanded. She learned to read, to write, and even to speak. Although finding her voice was not about learning the words, it was about learning to understand the world, learning to communicate with others, and learning, most importantly, to shape her own thoughts.
Once I lived in silence, but with words came understanding, and with it light and love. Annie was my miracle. She opened the door to a world I could not see, but one I could finally understand and learn to interact with.
Education meant the world cracked open, revealing itself in the contours of words. Helen named everything, devouring language, but the discovery of speech was not the same as finding her own voice. For what good is a voice if it is only an echo?
Even now, decades after I first learned the miracle of language at the water pump, I still struggle to make others understand that these truly are my own thoughts, my own words. People seem to think that because I cannot see or hear, I cannot think for myself. From the time I was 12 years old, I have fought diligently to make sure that the ideas I share are intentional and my own. I do not wish to be merely an imitation.
Helen has always had strong opinions of her own, sometimes too strong. I wasn't simply about teaching her the words, she needed to truly own them and to remember that first grasp that she had of abstract concepts. She was insatiable, and how the thoughts would race in her head before she could actually even communicate them.
Those early years were like being trapped in a maze. I knew what I wanted to say, but finding the words, it was like trying to catch smoke with my hands. Every thought had to be carefully constructed, every sentence a finger puzzle to be solved. I absorbed ideas from every Braille book I could get my hands on. I could not take notes like the other students, so I learned to memorize information from my lessons. Where there is a will, we find a way.
Helen, tell them about the first time you knew that there were needs in the world. I remember how it changed you.
Yes, I learned how fortunate I am. After college, I began to truly understand something crucial. I was blessed with a family that had means. I had a teacher, I had the finest education possible. I knew of teachers' hardships, and I admired her grit and dedication. But then I began receiving letters from others who were blind or deaf. Their stories were so different from mine. They had few opportunities to thrive. Blindness, poverty, so many other things left children without schools, adults without work, and families that struggled just to survive. I realized that my experience was not typical.
It was like a fire was lit within her.
How could I stay silent? I had been given a voice. I had to use it for those who had none. When I learned about those impoverished by their blindness, about the importance of my vote as a woman, about ensuring that all students have access to education, I knew I had to speak out.
And speak out she did, though I must admit I worried. Sometimes people are unkind to those who want to change the world.
Teacher, you taught me that words have power. I understand that my greatest privilege wasn't my education or even my ability to communicate. It was the platform that I had been given. You taught me that with power comes responsibility. The truth is, finding my voice was only the beginning.
Her voice, so hard won, became a powerful force for change. Helen Keller became increasingly involved in social causes, advocating for disability rights, women's suffrage, and peace. This would lead her to the founders of the American Foundation for the Blind and its proposed projects to improve the quality of life for blind people across the country.
People often ask me if I feel limited by my disabilities. I tell them that the only true limitations are those we place on our own spirits. The world's darkness is not in the eyes or ears. It is in the hearts of those who refuse to see or hear the needs of others. Every word I speak, every letter I write, carries the weight of those who cannot yet speak for themselves. That is why I continue to raise my voice, even when there's question in it. Because these words, these are all mine, and I will use them to fight for those who still struggle in silence.
In the spring of 1925, Helen and Annie were touring extensively through California, speaking to inspire donations to a newly founded American Foundation for the Blind. When first asked to speak at the International Lions Club convention, Helen originally declined because she was feeling overworked and exhausted. To travel to Ohio and then straight back to California would add to her fatigue. However, she had previously spoken with Lions clubs in support of donations and projects to aid the blind. Lions was a quickly growing powerhouse for service, with the 166 new clubs added to the US and Canada that year alone. With a bit of persuasion and knowing that the association was already working with the interests of disabled children and the visually impaired, she felt that going to Cedar Point, Ohio, would provide ongoing support to the American Foundation for the Blind. On June 30th, 1925, Helen and Annie were traveling from Akron, Ohio, where they had addressed an audience of 500 a few days earlier at a convention of the American Association of Workers for the Blind. The pair had taken a couple of days of rest for Helen's 45th birthday and to finish some correspondence, and then they headed to Sandusky. Local lore, as you heard, tells us that Helen's ride broke down on the way from the station to the park. Stranded on the roadside in rural Huron, a nearby farmer spotted the ladies, stopped, and offered to take them to the park in his truck. Although not the official style they were hoping to arrive in, both ladies were thankful for the local hospitality. Finally arriving at Cedar Point, Helen was escorted to the stage by an honor delegation from Alabama and stood to speak before an eager audience. The floor is yours, Miss Keller. I think we're back on track.
I have spent a decade as an advocate for disabled persons and women's suffrage. You should hear the things they say about me in the press. I'm a marvel, a miracle, a wonder. A miracle I'm not, I assure you. But I hope, as ever, that I can move audiences with my words to make miracles happen for the less fortunate. So many in need to fight for. I joined the American Foundation for the Blind in 1924 as a spokesperson for the foundation. I have spent the better part of the year taking the mission to groups around the country in hopes of raising $2 million to further the needs to fund the many projects that have been requested. I have worked tirelessly to push for better educational opportunities and employment rights, and social inclusion for the blind and the visually impaired. I have traveled extensively for over the past year, delivering a variety of speeches. It is my hope that my words will rouse others to furnish resources that will improve the quality of life for the blind community. This has not been an easy task. I find that it is hard to interest those who have everything in the needs of those who have nothing. But my heart is set on this: to mobilize public awareness and to contribute significantly to improving the rights and the opportunities available to people with disabilities. And so, I find myself with a new audience of groups that I have presented to. This association is working towards bettering life for the disabled in so many levels. Access for children through Braille Magazine, funding schools for the blind, providing radios for visually impaired children, and equally addressing the needs of elderly blind persons. Teacher has read that they seek to be eyes for the blind. These are surely like-minded champions in my cause. What would the world be like if no one suffered from a disability? Mm-hmm. Turn that paper over. You ready? Mm-hmm. No, go this way.
For over 20 years, Helen Keller has kept her hand on my face a good deal of the time, feeling the vibrations of my voice, putting her fingers in my mouth and feeling my tongue, and imitating the positions and repeating them over and over until she can hear her speak words that you can understand. I can't think of anything I want to ask you. If you think of anything more to your heart's desire than helping this brave girl put forth a great project. She has overcome tremendous obstacles. People always love those who overcome great obstacles. Can you think of anyone who has overcome greater obstacles anyone whom you would more desire to help carry through great work, she is going to ask you now in her own words.
Dear lions and ladies, I suppose you have heard the opportunity that represents a capricious lady who knocks on every door but once. And if that door isn't opened quickly, she passes on, never to return. I am your opportunity. I am knocking at your door. I want to be adopted. The legend doesn't say what you are to do when several beautiful opportunities present themselves at the same door. I suppose you'll have to choose the one you love best. I hope you will adopt me. I am the youngest here, but what I have to offer is full of splendid opportunities for service. The American Foundation for the Blind is only 4 years old. It grew out of the imperative needs of the blind and was called into existence by the sightless themselves. It is national and international in scope and in importance. It represents the best and most enlightened thought on our subject that has been reached so far. Its object is to make the lives of the blind more worthwhile everywhere by increasing their economic value and giving them the joy of normal activity. My friends, try to imagine how all of you would feel if you were suddenly stricken blind today. Picture yourself stumbling and groping at noonday, as if in the night. Your work, your independence, gone. In this dark world, wouldn't you be glad if a friend took you by the hand and said, "Come with me, and I will teach you how to do some of the things you used to do if you could see"? That is just the kind of friend the American Foundation is going to be to all the blind in this country if seeing people will give it the support it must have. You have all heard how through a little word dropped from the fingers of another, a ray of light from another soul touched the darkness of my mind, and I found myself, found the world, found God. It is because my teacher learned about me and broke through the dark, silent imprisonment which held me that I'm able to work for myself and for others. My friends, you see, it's not the money we care about. The gift, without the interest of the giver, it's empty. But if you care, if we can make the people of this great country care, the blind will indeed triumph over blindness. The opportunity I bring you, lions, is this: to foster and sponsor the work of the American Foundation for the Blind. Will you not help me hasten the day when there shall be no preventable blindness? No little, deaf, blind child untaught? No blind man or woman left unaided? I appeal to you, lions, you who have your sight, your hearing, you who are strong and brave and kind. Will you not constitute yourselves knights of the blind in this crusade against darkness? Thank you.
Miss Helen Keller could immediately feel the audience's response. The 7,500 people in attendance shook the stage with a standing ovation and a thunderous round of applause. The attending delegates made history that day. Under the direction of President Harry A. Newman of Toronto, Canada, they unanimously voted to accept vision as their collective mission, and followed that with a vote that made Helen and Annie the first two women welcomed by the association as honorary members.
Okay, step. Sit down.
I've come to celebrate with you on this special day. Though I cannot see you, I know you are there. I cannot hear you, but I feel the warmth of your presence. And I know that within you burns the same fire of service, the same devotion to humanity that has illuminated my path through life. When I stood here before the Lions so many years ago, I placed before them a challenge to become the Knights of the Blind in the crusade against darkness. How magnificently you have answered that call. You have worked tirelessly to bring the gift of sight to those trapped in the silent shadows of darkness. You have brought the miracle of vision to children whose worlds were once shrouded in uncertainty. Through vision screenings and the provision of eyeglasses, you have changed the destinies of so many, giving them clarity to read, to learn, and to dream. Over this past century, you have profoundly impacted the quality of life and vision health of hundreds of millions of men, women, and children worldwide. Through initiatives like the Sight First program, more than 544 million people have benefited from efforts to combat preventable blindness and receive support with vision impairments. You have built vision clinics and improved hospitals, trained physicians to perform and care eye surgeries, collected and recycled eyeglasses for those in need, and distributed medicines to prevent eye diseases. In addition, your Sight for Kids program has provided comprehensive health services to over 50 million children in underserved communities across multiple continents. And yet, these figures are but a token of the extensive reach and dedication of Lions in enhancing vision care and overall global well-being. I marvel at the great advances that medicine and technology have made in preserving and restoring sight. Once blindness was an unchangeable fact. Today, through the wonders of transplants and the generosity of eye banks, sights can be restored to those who once lived in darkness, and drugs have been developed to prevent diseases that steal eyesight away. It has been a partnership of scientific minds and generous donors that make their work possible, so that now what was impossible is a reality. I rejoice that science has turned its gaze towards the afflictions of the eye. Once diabetic retinopathy and macular degeneration were thieves of sight. Now they're met with resistance through groundbreaking treatments. Where once there was despair, now there is hope. Where once blindness doomed men and women to a life of poverty and dependence, now there is opportunity and self-reliance. In my travels across the world, I've witnessed firsthand the struggles of those living with blindness and other challenges. And I've also seen the resilience, determination, and power of Lions and their communities to uplift those in need. There is still much to do. We must change the way the world perceives people like me, not as hopeless, but as capable, as worthy of opportunity, as individuals who, when given the chance, can contribute to society in meaningful ways, and the challenge we can and must address. It's our duty to meet the needs of those in our local, regional, and global communities, ensuring that no one is left in darkness. We must not falter. We must press on, for there are still too many who suffer and are unable to afford the care they need. Poverty remains the cruelest companion of blindness, stealing livelihoods and limiting futures. But with each new innovation, with each new campaign for accessible care, we edge closer to a world where no one is denied the gift of a quality life because of their means. Lions, my Knights of the Blind, you have brought forth a world I only dared to dream of. You have answered the call, not with words, but with deeds. You have lifted many from darkness into light, from despair into hope. You have taken a mission to care for the visually impaired and exponentially expanded it beyond anyone's imagination on that June day in 1925. I'm in awe of the multitude of challenges you embrace in your dedication to this mission. Disease, genetics, diabetes, environmental factors, poverty, and though I will never see with my eyes, I see with my heart the legacy you have built. And so, my Knights of the Blind, carry on your noble mission. Bring sight where there is blindness, hope where there is darkness, and compassion where there is suffering. The fight is not yet won, But with courage, kindness, unity, and service, we move closer to the day when no one shall live in darkness for want of care. And on that day, I shall rejoice, not with my eyes, but with my soul.